Hey guys, welcome to another episode here. Today we're going to go over a variety of things, but we're going to start off with an installation of Windows 11. Um, Windows 11, while not my favorite choice for a desktop operating system, it is the current primary desktop operating system. Although Windows 12 has been announced, so that may change. But for the time being, Windows 11 is the current operating system. Windows 10, I believe, is supported at least for another year, maybe more. Microsoft keeps pushing that down because of the issues and bugs they're having in Windows 11. But for the sake of this video, let's do a Windows 11 install. So once you have your ISO file mounted to your USB drive, you have that inserted into your machine. Typically it's F12 or F8 to start the process of booting off the ISO file or the USB drive. So once you do that, you'll get to a screen that looks like this. You'll choose in the previous setting before this screen, you should really get an option for your language and what you're trying to install. So it'll say, welcome to Windows 11, and choose your language. So for this video, we're going to do English, and we're going to click Install Now. For this machine, I don't have a product key. However, if you do, you could put your product key in here now. If you're doing an OEM install, like a Dell or a Lenovo or something like that, and it's shipped with Windows 10 and you see this screen, you're going to have to reinstall the operating system as Windows 10 first, and then provide the upgrade from inside of Windows 10. Generally speaking, Microsoft, when they do the Windows 11 upgrade, you're getting a free upgrade license, not a free license. There's a difference. So once you get to this point, if you see this, I would suggest if you don't have a key, you could use I don't have a key. For this machine, this is a test machine. This machine does not have a key and will not live long enough for it to matter. So I will choose the I don't have a product key. Then I'm going to have to choose the operating system in which I want to install. Typically, you're going to choose what you have a license for. So if you have a license for Windows 11 Home, you'll choose Home. If you have Pro. If you're doing this install and you want to use a trial key and you want to eventually change it to Windows Pro for Workstation or Windows Pro in general, or just Windows Home, depending on, again, the licensing, you could choose one or the other. Once you get inside, you can relicense it as any of the Windows 11 operating systems. Typically, however, I would suggest always using the Pro version versus the Home version, even in a home situation, because the Pro version comes with more security, functions, and options, and is an all-around better developed version of the operating system. That would be the minimum of the choices that I would make. Obviously, if you have the ability to have Pro for Workstation, that'll give you additional options as well. But typically speaking, the update process in Pro and Home is different than in Workstation. So if you're doing Windows updates from a third-party tool like Automate or Ninja RMM, the update process in Workstation is much different than Pro. Once you have your choice, just click Next. You're going to have to accept the software license. Once we get here, we're not going to do an upgrade. We're going to do an install. So we'll choose Custom. We'll choose our hard drive. Just keep in mind that if you'd have less than 52 gigs of drive space, Windows 11 will not install. In this version, we can install it on anything because we're running in a hypervisor and the disk can expand. But again, if you're running on a regular hard drive, you need at least 52 gigs of drive space. And honestly, in order for it to function correctly, you need 250 gigs of drive space. Otherwise, you're wasting your time, because once you get all the updates and software installed, you won't be able to function. As far as memory and processors, generally speaking, with Windows 11, you want a minimum of 16 gigs of memory. You want at least 4 cores on a processor. If you don't have that, don't install it. It'll run like a boat anchor. If you're running an 8th gen processor or a 9th gen processor and you install Windows 11, the driver support ends, I think, at the version that's currently running, so you may get 6 months out of it before you have to replace the machine. Whereas if you keep Windows 10 on the machine, you should get another 1.5 years out of it. I would suggest don't upgrade to Windows 11 if you're running a 8th or 9th gen processor. If you don't know how to check that, one of my other videos has the information on how to check your revision and your versioning of your processor. I'll add the link to this description so that way you can check out that other video, which will teach you how to, discover what processor revision you have before you do your Windows 11 upgrade or install. During this process, typically speaking, you're going to copy the files over. It's going to get the files ready for the installation on the installation. It's going to install the features, the updates, and then it'll finish up. And once it does that, it's going to prompt you for your password. And you should be good to go at that point, assuming you add a password. If you don't add a password, in some instances, I know that that's not allowed anymore, especially if you're doing a live install, where in other words, you're going to install it and you're going to choose like Microsoft's web configuration, where you're going to have a Hotmail or a MSN or a on Microsoft.com license. In other words, you're going to log into the web version versus the on-prem version, the local installation. But we'll go through that in a second here. Obviously, your speed will vary depending on the hardware you're running. So we're approximately 8 minutes and 38, 39, 40, about 9 minutes into this video. Keep in mind that while this may look slow, it's not actually slow. Windows client installations going back from the days of like Windows 95 through current usually took a lot longer than this. So we're going to choose a region. I'm in the US, choose the US, hit next. Keyboard method, if you have a different kind of keyboard, you could choose different language settings for your keyboard. I'm going to choose yes for the US. I'm going to skip because I don't need to add a secondary layout. This is actually relatively new at Windows. This has existed in the Linux operating systems for about 20 years, but Windows has added the ability to add variables now. Now Windows will check for updates, which in the Windows world, there's always updates. Microsoft at this point has tried to make sure that your system has the latest version of the update, so that way there's less bugs, but unfortunately that doesn't mean there's no bugs. All right, so now Microsoft's Windows 11 here is going to ask me for my device name. For this, I'm going to call it the YTD Client 11. I'm going to hit Next. Obviously, after you change the system name, the system will reboot itself because it does that in all versions of Windows. And will bring itself back up into the setup. Now at this point, you're going to have to configure whether or not you want to use this personal use or work or school use. Now, the difference is, so if we go to work or school and click Next, it's going to ask me to sign into the Microsoft account. If I hit Sign In Options, I'll get the option for a domain instead. I would suggest using this method versus the personal method. So if you click this and hit Join Domain instead, what it's going to do is it's going to ask you to create a local account. This is the way you work around having to have an online account to log into your Windows. You want to create a local account. You don't want an online account. You don't want anything associated to an online account that links your operating system to the internet for security purposes. If you care about the security of your Windows operating system, create a local account, and then once you get into Windows, create a secondary local account and use the non-admin account to run. That'll secure your version of the operating system. You get infected with something like malware or a virus or something. The virus needs administrative access to run, so if you're running as a user, it won't be able to run itself or install itself. If you use an online account, you do get the option for recovery, so if you forget your password, you can get in. But if you have two accounts, two different passwords, and you save the secondary password, you have a secondary way into the system anyway. The downside to using the online account is that in the event that you're breached, compromised, or whatever you want to call it, somebody gains access into your account, they have access into your system, which means they have access into likely your OneDrive, and probably the majority of your files, which is a giant security hole and something that should be avoided. If you're not on a domain, you don't have an admin, you don't have somebody like me or another engineer or another tech in your infrastructure that controls this stuff, and you're doing it on your own, if you don't know how all this stuff works, then generally speaking, I tell you as somebody that's been in this industry for a long period of time, do not set yourself up with online accounts, especially if you don't have multi-factor authentication, whether you use Duo or Microsoft Authenticator, so you have two-factor authentication turned on. If you don't, then you're really asking for problems. I would always suggest a local account over an online account. I would always suggest a password that at least has two characters and two special characters, two numbers, two special characters, at least 8 characters long. Change it once a year. Don't write it on post-it notes. Don't do any of that stuff. If you need to save it someplace, get yourself Bitwarden or Keeper, which are two password programs where you could save your passwords in. Don't save them in the browsers. But we could get into security in another video. But for the sake of this, we're going to enter a name. So I'm going to call myself admin and just hit next. I need to create a password. Password. Next. It's going to ask me a series of security questions. Honestly, for this machine, I don't care. So we're just going to call it after you go through your security questions, now it's going to ask you a variety of privacy questions. Generally speaking, I would tell you, make sure all of this junk is turned off. If you want to turn it on individually for certain applications to work a certain way, do it later. but when you do the initial setup, shut it all off. Except now the system will run through checking for updates, it'll finish the installation process, and it will boot into Windows. For the sake of this video, so it doesn't go until 20-25 minutes waiting for this thing to apply things, I'm actually going to end it here, but hopefully this was helpful for some of you guys. We could go into the next video discussing the initial security configuration, installing some software, and setting this thing up so that way it's somewhat secure when you're working in workgroup mode and from home versus on a domain or infrastructure. Hopefully, again, you guys found this helpful. If there's anything else I could do for you, feel free to ask, and like and subscribe for more videos. All right, guys, take it easy now.